You are in the ring with Héctor Colon, 7-time national boxing champion turned nonprofit president and CEO. Héctor knocks out the big issues facing social services today with high-impact leaders from around the U.S. In the Ring is a creation of Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan and produced by No Studios. And now, here's Héctor Colon.
Hello, and welcome to In the Ring with Héctor Colon, the podcast that knocks out the challenges facing the social services sector and the people we serve. I am your host, Héctor Colon. This month, we have a very special episode. We are featuring 3 great guests, and we are recording this in front of a live studio audience at No Studios. We've got a lot to cover, so let's meet our amazing guests. My first 2 guests built their careers in public service. First, Dale Kooyenga, former state senator, now president and CEO of Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce. We have been friends probably since 2010, 2011, where we share about our faith, our friendship, food, and thank you for being a guest here today.
Thank you.
Appreciate you so much. And Joel, Brennan, also a friend, served as the Secretary of Department of Administration. He was the former CEO of Discovery World, and he is now the President and CEO of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. We also been friends for a long time. And Audra and I, your wife, started our careers together, and she was a lobbyist, and I was a lobbyist, and she actually taught me how to be a good lobbyist and advocate for the city of Milwaukee. So I'm very thankful to your wife and also to you. Thank you for your friendship.
I'm thankful for my wife too, but great to be with you.
Thank you. And Tara Treglowne, friend and colleague at LSS. She's been with us for 20 years, and she's had various roles leading up to her current role as the Vice President of Adult Residential Long-Term Care Services. And I would describe her as hungry, humble, and smart. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Héctor.
You can learn more about our guests at www.lss.org/inthering. Thank you all for being here. Are you ready for round 1?
Let's do it.
Governor Evers declared 2024 the Year of the Worker in Wisconsin. I think we all agree that addressing our workforce challenges needs to be a top priority for Wisconsin. Dale, I want to start with you. Why is this a priority for MMAC?
Well, at MMAC, we have an economic development arm called M7, which is corporate attraction, and very successful. Just got Microsoft here, a lot of other wins. But we could do so much more if we just had the workforce. So when you really look at this, it's really remarkable. For all practical purposes, we have negative unemployment. We have more jobs out there than we have the people to fill those jobs. And so we need all hands on deck. And I think it's a multi-pronged approach. But as far as like the Year of the Worker, I mean, it's if you're a worker, there's plenty of work out there for you.
Great. Joel, same question?
Yeah, well, so the Greater Milwaukee Committee is a 75-year-old membership organization, and our members we have about 200 members. They're the CEOs or leaders of major corporations, but also heads of nonprofits, heads of the higher education institutions, and across all of those, the biggest issue, the biggest limiting factor is workforce. I mean, here in Wisconsin, we have, as Dale was saying, some of the best unemployment numbers in 50, 60 years, some of the highest labor force participation rates in the country. But at the same time, we've got demographic challenges, birth rates lower than they have ever been, and people retiring and leaving the workforce. And so really, as we all try to grow Wisconsin and grow southeastern Wisconsin, the limitations on that really are around people, are around workforce, and the matching of skills to the available opportunities. And so I think everybody, it's great when the governor says this is the Year of the Worker, but it's going to be the Year of the Worker for many years to come if we want to focus on this and if we want to get to where we truly want to be as a state and as a community.
I remember not too many years ago, it was the Fight for 15. It was like the big political movement, like Fight for 15. And the push there was to put $15 an hour into state law. And what I say now is the employers will fight you to fight for work for $15 an hour. And that didn't come out of Madison or Washington, D.C. That's just the market. That's how tight the market is.
Yeah, I remember when I first started LSS, some of our entry-level jobs were at $15 an hour at HAMI, which is in Wittenberg, Wisconsin, and now it's over $20 an hour. So definitely the market has changed, and we need to elevate and pay our staff in order to recruit them and also retain them. Tara, what's your take?
I would say a critical area of a workforce that we need to pay close attention to is our social services sector. Our workforce within social services is extremely important because we focus on the health and well-being of our communities through focusing on social determinants of health, which more specifically is basic needs that every individual should be afforded, such as food, housing securities, clothing, access to transportation, and basic access to resources. We also provide or employ professionals that provide levels of services and support that other industries or businesses may not be providing today. Our healthcare partnership program, for example, we work with individuals to remove barriers so that they can maintain their health and be active members of our workforce.
The governor also called out a decade-long struggle to retain, attract, and train talented workers to address the state's workforce challenges. I want to go across the board. In what ways should we be addressing these shortages?
Well, it's a multi-pronged approach, and if you look at the numbers, we are in a really tough spot in Milwaukee. So we don't even compare yourself to Sun Belt places or the West Coast. Just in the Midwest, which is having its own demographic challenges, the only city that had worst population decline is Cleveland. So we have a problem. And so I appreciate the mayor with his, big audacious goal of going from 600,000 some to 1 million people. But you need to have policies and be very deliberate about, okay, how are we going to do that? And I think we are at a turning point in the Milwaukee region that there's a lot of good things happening. And I feel like the statistics I just gave you that look backwards will not be the statistics looking forward. But we need to it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, on different levels is our education system here has to be better. When you only have 1 in 5 kids that are reading and math proficient, I mean, that's an untapped, talented resource. There's public policies we need to look at and say, okay, the regions that are growing, what do their tax policies look like? What do their social safety net policies look like? There's public policy issues that need to be fixed in order to get more people to workforce. And you look at that with a lot of retirees that go down to other places of the country. I call it Bob Uecker talent, is that I think a lot of folks are happier when they don't retire. They have something to give. And so how do we keep that in the workforce? I did a lot of studying on Chicago. I mean, Chicago, for every one person that we're losing right now from the Milwaukee Metro to Chicago Metro, we get 2 back. So we're gaining people from Illinois. But what we're losing is we're losing another population that other cities are relying upon that we don't have, and that's a foreign-born population. And what's important about that is foreign-born populations are more likely to be entrepreneurs, more likely to have a strong sense of community and bring that community aspect to them. And so when you look at Chicago, Chicago has a 20%, I'm talking about legal immigration here, 20% foreign-born population. Milwaukee has 10%. So we got to be more deliberate about saying Milwaukee has a diverse immigrant community. We want these immigrants to come to Milwaukee and form their community here. So one of the things we're doing at MMAC this summer is we're going to start doing a series of articles that's going to highlight the immigrant entrepreneur, and we're going to highlight people from around the world that came here from Milwaukee, built a sense of community, and, oh, by the way, made a lot of money too.
Well, that's great. I was just listening to talk radio today. Senator Johnson was talking about how important immigration is for our workforce and to grow the economy.
It's great. It has to. I mean, it takes 18 years and 9 months to make a baby. So that's not going to be a solution anytime soon. But this is an adult podcast, right? If you do the math, okay. But if you look at quicker fixes, I mean, there's a whole other podcast probably, but as far as immigration policy in D.C., and we could weigh in on that. But essentially, what we need to be a place that is welcoming for everybody. We need to keep people here, retain people here. One more stat I saw, not to be long-winded. One more stat that's really interesting is that when you look at other cities in the Midwest and really around the country, there's a pulling of the population from the rural areas of the state into the metro areas. And Wisconsin is the opposite. It's really interesting where we're losing people to other parts of Wisconsin. The time period that we looked at is we lost about 18,000 folks, and only 1,000 was in Dane County. So this is not just a Dane County issue, which is growing. It's around the state. So we really need to retain more in the Milwaukee Metro, get people here from other parts of the country, and look at ways to get more of an immigrant community here as well.
Okay. Tara, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I also think that we need to get creative with how we're recruiting talent. We need to learn and get comfortable with employing individuals that may be transitioning out of our residential centers, our refugees, persons with disabilities, those that are recovering from substance use disorder. This is actually a topic that hits close to home with me and is highly personal, as my brother dedicated his entire career to working in the social services sector. In his last 20 years of his career, he worked at an inpatient mental health facility. And he has since passed away. But what most people did not know about my brother is that he actually received services from that facility a number of years prior to being employed there. And what I would hear from his colleagues and coworkers in passing throughout the years is that the incredible impact he had on the clients he served. And they would often call him to work with some of the most challenging clients, those that were in crisis. And I truly believe that he was able to do that because he knew what it was like to be on the other side of the services that he was providing. At LSS, we talk about dimensions of diversity and how beneficial it is to hire people with different experiences and backgrounds. Sometimes we call it lived experience. And I feel that when we can approach workforce development in that manner, that it helps inform new perspectives on the world. It really cultivates richer workplace cultures, and ultimately, I think it improves how we serve our clients and each other.
Thank you, Tara, and condolences to you and your family regarding your brother. Joel?
Yeah, as these guys have said, I think it's a multi-pronged approach, and I think there's a lot that's happening right now that is making this area more attractive for people from who are not from here to come here, and some of the underlying things that we're doing will strengthen that. However, I'm going to lean in for a second on the people who are already here, and we need to do a better job of making sure that we are preparing them. You know, we mentioned that labor force participation in Wisconsin is amongst the highest in the country, but everywhere in the country it's lower than it was 20 years ago. And one of the biggest reasons for that are women 35 to 44 are working less than they did 20 years ago. And a big reason for that is because the early child care system in our country is broken. It's like a three-legged stool where you can't get access to it. It costs too much, and the people who are working in there aren't making enough to make a living wage. And so, you know, that's an area, and I think it's been a clarion call for us for a while to ensure that in order for kids to perform well in the K-12 system, in that 0 to 3 space, they need to be much better prepared, and we are frankly failing them in a whole bunch of different ways. And so, you know, to Dale and the MMAC's credit, they have done a great job over the last 25 or 30 years focusing on that K-12 system, and they're going to continue to do that. On the two ends of that spectrum, in the early childhood and in higher ed, I think there's crises in both, and we've got to, as a community and as the people who are leaders here, ensure that we're doing whatever we can to strengthen those areas. You know, there are, in the private colleges and universities, you know, there is a huge crisis going on. The technical schools are doing relatively better than the universities at this point, but I think that's part of where I think we need to look at the whole array of education here, and we need to make sure that we're doing things that we're doing more and doing right by the people who are here and who are from here and who are growing up here. Because if they're sitting on the bench, we're losing out, and that's going to keep us from being who we want to be.
Great insights, all of you, on the first round. How you feeling so far?
Feeling
Ready to go, champ?
That's all you got? Come on, let's go.
I don't see you sweating. All right, we're gonna get tougher here.
All right.
In round 2, we're going to address 3 specific areas that Governor Evers says we need to shore up. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Supporting your employees is more than a paycheck and 401k. It's just a fact. People today are at a higher risk of experiencing mental illness, housing insecurity, and substance abuse. Do you know the health of your employees, your communities? How can you step up your benefits to better address their well-being? M3 Insurance helps businesses see beyond basic benefits and support employees where they live. It's a meet them where they are approach that LSS delivers to their clients every day. M3 and LSS offer real solutions to now commonplace realities that strengthen employees and inspire communities to thrive. Test your employee benefit strategy now by going to m3ins.com.
You ready to get back into the ring for round 2?
Let's do it.
Let's go, champs. In the state of the state, the governor shared 3 workforce areas that he says we need to bolster, including healthcare, education, and childcare. He also introduced a new office for the state employee engagement and retention. What do you think about these priorities? Tara, I'd like to start with you.
While I think those priorities are great, I think there needs to be greater focus on workers in the social services sector. I think there's populations that we have not tapped into that of individuals that are ready and willing to work. At LSS, we work with individuals that have incredible odds stacked against them. Children, youth and families in crisis, individuals recovering from substance use disorder, persons with disabilities, refugees, those struggling with mental illness. The National Institute on Mental Health actually estimates that 57 million Americans, or 1 in 5, are struggling with some condition that affects their mood, thinking, or behavior. We work with these individuals every day, getting them ready for the workforce and prepared with the skills they need to be successful in life. They may need resources and tools that are currently not embedded in our workforce strategies today, but that's where I would argue we can come together across sectors and businesses to strengthen our workforce initiatives and be more collaborative and communicative.
Thank you, Tara, for that unique insight. Dale, Joel, any thoughts relating to what Tara just said?
Well, I mean, just to take a step back here. So MMAC, our vision is to be a globally competitive region that fosters high-value jobs for everyone in our community. And we have 3 strategic pillars that we fight for, and that is talent, growth, and livability. And I think what the governor highlights there is at the core of all that. So we're all on board. And as the governor said, number 1 being healthcare, that's what the numbers show. The numbers show that number 1 is healthcare right now. A couple different thoughts on that. First of all is, with that being said, in my current role with over 2,400 members and listening to all the different industries, and in my previous career of being in the state Senate, state assembly, there'd be professionals that came in and be like architects and like, oh, we have a huge talent shortage. And then the CPAs would come in, we have a huge talent shortage. And then like the trades would come in, we have and it's just like, okay, everyone in their profession thinks that they have a huge shortage. The only professions that don't have a shortage is professional sports athletes and politicians. Everyone else has a shortage out there. And it goes back to demographics. So, but the most acute one, I think, is probably, I think it is what the governor said. That is healthcare. If you look at the numbers, that is not a political opinion. That is just straight up where the numbers are at, because it's a twofers. You have an aging population that requires more care, and you have less people to provide that care. So that's a problem. One of the things that we just announced at MMAC is that we're putting $600,000. We have a health plan with United Healthcare. And so we're taking a portion of those proceeds. We're supporting scholars that are going to graduate Milwaukee high schools. They're going to go to Milwaukee area universities, and then they're going to work in Milwaukee area healthcare settings and see that continuing through. And we just need to have more folks go into those areas. So I think what the governor said as far as priorities make tremendous sense.
Yeah, and I think we all can agree that the numbers tell you that, and Dale made this point, that we're all getting older, and you're looking at a case where we may be 20,000 nurses short of what we need to be within the next 15 or 20 years, and that's been predictable over the last several years. And I think part of what we need to do is continually modify and change. One of the challenges I think we have, I work with the Higher Education Regional Alliance, and this is something that over the last 5 or 6 years, it may seem like something that is natural and should be done, but the heads of all the universities, technical colleges, all the higher educational institutions decided to come together, the leaders, and start to share best practices, but also specifically work on how are they connecting better with industry and how are they matching up the skills. They have done things like, it was just announced in the last 3 weeks or so that they've got a federal earmark to do micro-credentialing so that you can get in, whether it's in AI or in healthcare or in manufacturing, you can employees are going to be able to get these very quick things. In the course of a few months, you get a badge or a credential that shows that you are connecting to an issue that is more relevant to the workplace today. And I think that's part of what we need to continue to do. But it's also for higher education, they are set up, and I say this as, my daughter is graduating high school in the next 10 days. I'm going to start weeping here in a second about it, but and my son will be graduating next year. So I'm getting my kids ready to go, and there are kids who are fortunate, they're probably going to college, but there are, the colleges and universities here, and even the technical schools, often the technical school's been better at this, but they were set up to take 18-year-olds and work with them for 4 or 5 years, and that's what they know, and that is not what higher education is going to be in the future. They're going to have to be, as Dale said, what it's predictable what the next crop of 18-year-olds is going to be for about the next 18 years, because we know what birth rates are, and they're very low right now, and we're at a dip, a big one right now. So they have to be prepared to be different than who they have been. And for any of us who have gone to college or work in universities, they will admit it themselves. It's hard for them to do that. So we've got to be partners in making sure that they can be a little bit more malleable and they can react, that they can bob and weave, if I may use a boxing term.
Nice.
Like, that's not something that they have been prepared to do over the course of the last 75 or 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think Joe makes a really good point. I think it's one of those strengths of this region is that the economy, the technology is changing so quickly, is that the old model of saying these are the years you're in school, and then you graduate, then you're out and you're in the workforce, is that intersection between education and the workforce is breaking down. And part of that's good, and some of that is concerning. But I think for this region, it's generally good. If we're still the number one per capita manufacturer in the company at a state level, we're number 2 for the metro. So this is a manufacturing community. And the reason that we've maintained our excellence in manufacturing is because we are also a robotics and automation leader. And so we're taking that new technology and putting it on manufacturing. That changes quickly. And so you need people on the floor with a robust technical system, an upscaling system, employers are on the move that are educating employees in real time. And now what you're looking at is that this region may be the leader. I would make a strong case that it is the leader on artificial intelligence. I mean, Microsoft's investment here was clearly, they say, we are investing in Milwaukee. This is going to be the center of our artificial intelligence hardware, and particularly we're interested in incorporating this in the manufacturing sector. Well, at the same time, the place that has the most promise for artificial intelligence is the healthcare region. And the number one holder of healthcare AI patents is GE Healthcare. So we're posed to be the leader on this new front of technology, but we do need exactly what we're talking about, and that is to break down the walls between our economy and our school institutions to make both more relevant as we move into this new economy.
Great. That completes round 2. You guys are looking like you have a lot of energy. So you ready for round 3?
Let's do it. We can get there.
In our final round, we're going to talk about what it's like to bob and weave and roll with the punches in light of the political differences and divisiveness that we have in our society and in our state. And we will discuss ideas on how to make these encounters a win for all. Are you ready for round 3?
Hit me.
All right, let's go, champs. There's a lot of jabs and heavy blows happening between both political parties in the press. Take, for example, Governor Evers, when he said in the State of the State, one of the two greatest challenges is the Republican Party majority's disinterest in working towards a meaningful bipartisan plan and do something about it. Republican Speaker Robin Vos responded to the governor's plan saying, "That's great, but it's not what Wisconsin needs right now." Them is some fighting words. And there's been a lot more in the public regarding the plan and disagreements and a lot of divisiveness. Dale, Joel, you have worked successfully across the aisle. What is your advice on how we can knock out the partisan divide?
Well, I mean, I don't recommend everyone take my route to understand this because my route was in part shaped by my experience in Baghdad in 2008. And if you look at the strategy we did that was part of the surge, most people think that was more troops. It was more troops. But a key part of that strategy also was that we literally sat down with the enemy and said, what do you need to change? What do you need to, and they essentially came back to, we want respect, we want jobs. And so we did all sorts of things called the Sons of Iraq to give them security positions, and violent acts fell 80%. And that really shaped a lot of my thinking. It was a transformative shaping experience for me. So when I came back to Wisconsin and then 2 years later ran for office, and people were shocked that, wow, you really feel like you have the ability, like you sit down with other people with other opinions and you're not hostile at all, you just listen and interact. I was like, I've literally sat down with Al Qaeda. Like I've literally sat down with some very bad dudes and said, like, all right, what do we have to do to move forward? And so I think there's, for a couple different contexts here, is number one is people always say, well, it's never been this bad. It has been this bad. If you look at American history, I think there's a void in knowledge of American history to think that we're at some point right now that it's never been that bad. I mean, as Clausewitz said, is that all war is a continuation of politics that could not be resolved politically and then fell into a war. That is what Clausewitz is famous for saying. And we literally had a war in this country. And we've had many, many issues throughout the decades. So in the context of time, I don't think it's as horrible as you think. And there's a lot of issues where I could tell you from the MMAC perspective, maybe because we're a very non-partisan, bipartisan group, but this last session particularly, almost every single issue that we went to Governor Evers on and the Republican legislature, like, hey, this is very important to our community, like we got to a yes. Like we got there. And so there's that context. And the last context is just internationally. I mean, continuously now you look around the world and we're seeing this. Like we're seeing this with investment in our region. Is where else would you want to be? I mean, do you want to be in the Middle East right now with what's going on with Israel and Palestine and Iran and Yemen? Do you want to be in the Pacific with the China-Taiwan issue and North Korea? I mean, you want to be in South America where totalitarianism and poverty is on the rise? You want to be in Africa where, like, any given day there could be a coup and the government taking over? Like, where do you want to be? And the answer is, like, you still want to be in North America. And still in North America, in the context of time, we're pretty good. So I think there's a lot of news and elevating political issues, but and as someone who's been on the inside, it's not as bad as you think it is.
Dale, thank you for that insight, because there's a lot behind the scenes that happens that oftentimes the public is not aware of, because we see the taglines and the negative news and the divisiveness. So thank you for sharing that. Dale, you want to comment on that?
I'm Joel. Sorry. Dale's the one with the longer reach.
That's right.
6'7".
Thank you. There you go.
So Dale went to Baghdad to figure this out. But for me, it was like in Clinton, Wisconsin, that I learned about this. And it wasn't something I learned. It was just kind of, this is who we should be. So this is in March of 2020. We all can probably remember what happened in March of 2020, but this was like a couple of days before the world shut down on us. I drove down to Clinton. I had breakfast with Amy Loudenbeck, who is a pretty conservative member of the state assembly. She's now left the legislature. She works for School Choice Wisconsin. But we sat down in a cafe in her hometown and the area she represented, and just kind of talked about, hey, things they may not be as bad as they've ever been, Dale, but they aren't good. But it was, how do we get a chance to work together? She and I worked on a committee together related to the state capitol and the executive residence, and so it was just like, how do we find some common ground, because that's what we need to do. So there are still plenty of people who are engaged in government for whom that's the reason they're there, and I would credit Dale as being one of those. I think our relationship, we've always been friendly, but our relationship we got to be better friends during the course of COVID, and like some of the conversations that we were having behind the scenes. Same, I would say, with Paul Farrow, the county executive in Waukesha County, who I think might have even been the chair of the Republican Party while I was working for Tony Evers as the secretary of the Department of Administration. And he and I would have conversations, and we would call and talk to each other, not with any cameras rolling or not with any public around, but it was like, okay, here's what I need, here's the things that we can be doing, and how do we get this done? And that's when, for most of us who go into public service, I think that's part of the biggest part of why we do it. And there are still plenty of people who do that. There are, unfortunately, I think there are people who are in it for blood sport. And I think, we're going to have a question too, or we're going to talk a little bit about how does this get better. I think things may get better as the legislature becomes a little bit more closer to 50-50, because part of the challenge of where things have been now is just this imbalance. And when you're making more policy in a Republican primary than you are in a general election, which is, I think, the way things have often been in the last several years, that's a challenge for us. So we've got to make sure that we're getting to a point where problem solving is paramount, and that's our intent, rather than kind of the blood sport. The comments you put up there. It's the kind of this you must lose in order for me to win, this zero-sum game. And to me, that was the most disappointing thing about my 3 years in Madison. And I was there as part of the state government during the height of COVID and the economic response to COVID. And I can tell you that, there were a whole bunch of times and opportunities where we could do the right thing. And 9 times out of 10, we didn't. And for the most part, and that was, maybe not, in my view, not equally distributed between one ideology or one party and the other, but both parties did it wrong. And people, in that case, people probably died because of it. They suffered more because we couldn't put aside the partisanship, even in the height of a global crisis like that, in order to do the right thing. And when so that may not be the worst that it's ever been, but it's worse than we should be, and we need to be better than that. And I think that's the call that we all have. And when for people like all the 3 of us, you didn't serve in state government, did you?
No.
All 3 of us
That's why she
did.
looks the best at that.
Yeah, exactly. You're not tainted.
No.
But we're proof that there's life after. But I also think that we are part of those who come out of it and say, okay, there are still people in there who are focused on what's going on inside that Capitol dome, and there's 6 million people who live outside there who don't care what's going on. They care about its effect on them, but they don't care about the back and forth and who's tweeting this and who's tweeting that. Like, that stuff doesn't matter in the big realm. And I hope that lots of us have learned that lesson, and we employ the way that we work afterwards is hopefully a reflection of that.
Yeah. Joel, I agree with you that it's not as good as it needs to be. And I also agree with Dale that it's probably not as bad as it was at some periods in history. I hear a lot that back in the 70s and the 80s, there would be a vehement disagreement on the floor regarding legislation. But then afterwards, Democrats and Republicans would get together with their spouses and have dinner and really have friendship. From what I gather, I don't feel that that's happening as much now. Do you agree? And why? And what could we do to change that?
I disagree. It is happening.
Okay.
I mean, I think the political structure does not lend itself to saying, "Oh, here's my friend Peter Barca," and then putting it on Twitter, because there's so much hate in the primaries on both sides, and your next election before you is the primary, not the general election. But there truly are some fairly solid relationships that, I feel like that's one of the things, like 20 years from now, be like, back 20 years ago, they used to do this. And it's just going to, and it is happening. I mean, the relationships are, and I agree with Joel completely. It could be a lot better. It should be a lot better. We should expect more. And you should punish people in public office that don't behave accordingly. I think that's part of your process as voters, is you should let them know that when you see that behavior, it's unacceptable. It's not conducive to solving problems. But it's happening. I mean, just look at last year. What if I told you that, you said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to solve the fiscal crisis for the city and the county. I want you to save the parks, and I want you. There's been two. So let's go through like what happened, because I think it's extraordinary. Is Republicans said, hey, we think we want to support more police and more fire, and we think we need more police and fire. And then Democrats said, hey, we got to support the parks, we got to support the libraries. And what we did is we put everyone in the room together and said, well, what's stopping you from hiring more police? And what's stopping you from saving the parks and the libraries? And essentially it was the pension funds of the county and the city. And we all agreed that the pension problem of the county and city was a problem created by nobody in the room right now. These are problems that was created decades ago. So let's agree that the problem that we're both struggling with was a result of generations ago. But we were handed this problem. All agree with that. Okay, then let's all agree that when we negotiate this, that we're not going to social media and this is confidential. Okay, we all agree to that. Okay, what's important to you? The people at right center say what's important to us is back the badge and more police and more fire. The people generally left of center say what's important to you? We want to save the parks. And we did that. We have 2 pension plans that are now on a soft freeze that are going to go away. We save the parks. There's no libraries being closed. They're adding police, adding fire, and it's because you had a leader in the mayor and the county exec who were not cynical, who worked with Republican leaders. The Republican leaders worked with them. Then it got the governor, and the governor said, hey, if you're going to work with my young leadership in Milwaukee County, in the city of Milwaukee, and you've come to agreement with the Republican legislature, I'm happy to support my young leaders. And it was signed into law. I mean, it is extraordinary. And so nobody came around that and did an article saying, like, this is what right looks like. Wow, way to go, guys. But that's what happened. And so that's why my perspective is good things are happening. And the same thing happened with the Brewers, with the county exec, the Republican legislature. So good things are happening. It's rarely celebrated, but we need to build on this base. And also, I'll tell you from an MAC perspective, is we encourage folks to, like, hey, let's not, have Cracker Barrel jokes and this back and forth between county execs and stuff like that. So in some measure, we could do better, but things are going right.
Can I just say, sure. I thought it was extraordinary, except that it ought to be more ordinary for us.
Yes.
The challenge with that is Milwaukee got to the precipice of absolutely being like Detroit, like that, like we were going to not be able to provide the very basic of services, and the idea that and this was a really a creation of the state legislature, because in Milwaukee and in local government around the state, you really have 2 ways to raise revenue. One is through the state shared revenue program. The other is local property taxes. One had been frozen for more than 20 years. The other, they limit the increases. And so, as costs were rising in local government, their ability to pay for those got more and more compromised to the point where we were on the verge of all those things being cataclysmic in Milwaukee. And the idea that it got that bad before we could make it any better, that's part of the problem. So yes, it was extraordinary, but we need to make it more ordinary. And I think the opportunity is there. I'm old enough now to be probably consider myself throughout my career like a student of public policy, and have worked enough in and around Wisconsin now to know what I think is how you make a strong government. I think you have to have a strong legislative, strong executive, strong judiciary, and strong outside influences, well-organized outside influences that can have an impact. And here in Wisconsin, in the last 15 years, you've had a position where the legislature has the scales have been weighed in their favor. And as you get to a point where, regardless of what you think of, on your ideology or where you are on the political spectrum, but where you have, instead of 62 members of the assembly and of the Republicans and 37 Democrats, if that gets to be 52-47 or 51-48, like that allows outside interests, and it allows whether you're, social service providers, or whether you're a business interest, or whether you're labor unions, it affords you a chance to make your argument in a stronger way than when, there is the pack mentality, when there are 60 and Robin Voss has a lock on those 60 and they're not going anywhere. So I think there's an opportunity for from a legislative standpoint for us to get into a very different place than we have been. I think as somebody who's been around public policy for a while, I think that's exciting for Wisconsin. I think that's an opportunity for change that is long overdue here.
I'd say maybe. My concern is that and by the way, I don't think that gerrymander is good. I think it's good to have a body that represents the state, whatever that means. But my concern is if you have a 51-49 majority, both parties have nut jobs, and they have nut jobs that are elected, and you have 2 or 3 people that hold up the process now. Like, you're going to have the equivalent of a Marjorie Taylor Greene or an AOC that are now able to hold the whole body hostage because you only have a 2 or 3 vote margin. Now, hopefully that leads to a breakdown, what they call it the Hastert rule at the federal level. Hopefully you see more of what you saw in Congress with Speaker Johnson, who said, the heck with this rule that the party that's in control has to have the votes to carry the day. Hopefully, ideally, that would lead to more saying, hey, the votes, the D's or R's, whatever they are, like, we're moving forward, and both parties shouldn't be held hostage to the extremes of their parties.
Yeah, and
I will say another thing that the point is, as far as like we were on the precipice, America has always solved problems on the precipice. I love the Winston Churchill quote that says, America can always count on doing what's right after every other option has been exhausted.
Okay, Joel, quickly, did you want to say something? And I'm going to end.
No, I think that anything that disrupts the status quo is a positive, and what we are entering into. the way things are going to go for the foreseeable future will be different than the way they have been over the last 10 or 15 years, and that's good. That's good for us, and I think we will learn. We will continue to adapt because of that. I think what's happened at the federal level, while a lot of it is a train wreck, the idea that there is this, they're forced bipartisanship, that's generally a good thing, and maybe we're going to have more of that here in Wisconsin.
I can see now why, Hector, you put me in the middle.
Right, you're right in the middle.
And I'll just add real quickly, when partisan issues arise, it really takes away the focus and the energy of the important and necessary work that we're doing in our communities to ensure the health and well-being of the individuals that we serve. And, I would just add that we work, everything we do is humanitarian issues, and we need to come together often and talk about the greatest needs of our communities.
Thank you so much. You all were a knockout. You did really well. I really appreciate you so much for your valuable insights. We're done, and you guys look great. Thank you again for being with me here today. As always, you can find out more about our interviews on our website. You can also subscribe on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn so you don't miss any of these important conversations in the future. Thank you to our sponsor, M3. Con mucho cariño, with much affection. Bye.